I'm Chris Anderson. I'm chairman of the Planning Commission. And I'm just going to give like a 2-minute overview of what the agenda is going to be tonight and turn it over to Graham Smith, who's with Gold Evans, our consultant, and Courtney Christensen, our city administrator. The Planning Commission's been working with Gold Evans pretty much for the last year to come up with a completely revised comprehensive plan. The plan, I think, dates back to the 70s. And about every decade, the Planning Commission's done a fairly significant rewrite, but never gone through and just completely started at ground zero and went forward. That's what we did this time. So the plan itself looks a lot different than its predecessors. The main part of the plan is contained in 2 documents. One we've labeled Comprehensive Plan, which is sort of a vision kind of document, and that's primarily what's going to be discussed tonight. The other is historical data, which was a significant part of the former comprehensive plan, but that's been separated off into a separate document, and that's things like census data, historical development of the city, those kinds of things. The plan has gone, as I said, it's been going on, the Planning Commission's been working on it going on a year now, and at the last couple of meetings, we decided it was in good enough shape that we could have a public meeting just so interested folks could get a little bit of an introduction into it, and also to get your reaction to whatever questions, comments. We're looking for that. This is not in final form yet. This is not the public hearing where we would approve it and send it on to the council for approval. And of course, ultimately, the council is the body that approves all of this. The comprehensive plan, the new one in its new iteration, is a very general document. It's really a statement of intent and principles. It doesn't have any really detailed action like our building guidelines, for example. So what we've done is pretty much kept it at a conceptual level. In addition to that, going through the process, our consultant and planning commission identified 6 areas that were worthy of getting into a little more detail, getting into the weeds, and maybe taking some action on, maybe not, but studying them separately. And those are the 6 that are listed there. It's basically redevelopment, preservation, technology, connectivity. I can't actually read it in this. And my list is a little bit different, so I won't read it. But at any rate, those areas are areas that the Planning Commission will be taking up in the future. And it's, the council has looked at those as well and has sort of given us what they think their priorities are on that. What we're going to do at this point is I'm going to turn it over to Graham Smith, who's with Gold Evans. We'll go through the comprehensive plan. Then Courtney will come up and basically go through some of those white paper areas, the ones that we're giving some priority to. And then we'll do questions and answers at the end of the presentation. So with that, I'll turn it over to Graham.
Thank you all for coming out tonight. I appreciate it. Thank God we don't have any snow, so it made it easy for people to come out. As Chris said, we want to take some time tonight and go through the plan that we've been working on for about the last year and let you know what we've been up to, talk a little bit about the process, but really focus on what's in the plan document itself. As Chris said, it's quite different from your existing plan, where your existing plan was more of a historical document and how you got to where you are today. This includes pieces of that, but really jumps off from there and starts to paint a vision, identify some goals, principles, and policies to move forward. So we'll take a little bit of time here and go through the presentation. As Chris mentioned, this is a comprehensive plan, so it's a little bit different than some of the things you've been doing in the past with the tools and regulations that you've been addressing, like the design guidelines, stormwater master plan. And really, comprehensive plans are the 30,000-foot view of your community, those principal statements to move your community forward, to address issues as they come. And really, the comprehensive plan power comes from the enabling legislation from the state that allows the planning commission of any community to create a comprehensive plan. Kansas is a little different in their enabling. They actually identify topics that should be included in your plan. And so this is a list of those topics, and we've tried to hit all of these either through the plan document itself or the community profile. As I said, the comprehensive plan is different than the tools and regulations that you've been working on recently or in the recent past. But this comprehensive plan should tie to those tools and regulations directly and have a future impact on those based on the goals and vision that are defined. And so as you move forward in addressing issues and doing projects within the community, you may want to revisit some of these things, whether it's zoning or the design guidelines, stormwater master plan, based on the vision and goals that are ultimately adopted within the comprehensive plan. So also, as Chris said, we created 2 documents that make up this comprehensive plan. The community profile is a review of data and analysis. It really paints kind of a snapshot of where your community is today. So we looked at past demographic information, housing data, the stormwater master plan, zoning code, accident data, all kinds of stuff that are included in that community profile, again, to give you an idea, provide that baseline of where your community sits today with regard to several different topics. It also helped us identify the primary issues and opportunities within the community. And a lot of those are encapsulated in the plan, but also in the issue papers that Courtney will talk about in just a little bit. The comprehensive plan itself, as I said, we tried to capture the history of the community in a succinct way. We also, within the plan document, gave a quick overview of the profile. So you'll see it in 2 places, but if you really want the thorough pieces of the census data and the things that we reviewed during the process, you need to go to the community profile itself. I should mention real quickly that both of these documents have been on the website for 3 weeks, 2 weeks or so, and they can be downloaded from there. And we do have 1 copy of it that we can pass around if we need to. So the comprehensive plan started with the history, painted that picture again of the community profile overview, but the bulk of the plan lies in the vision and goals, and then what we're calling the community direction, which include the principles and the policies that help implement the vision for the community. So again, the community profile is the background data. If you all remember, or if you all participated, back in May, once we had the community profile done, we had a public meeting. We had about 50 people there. How many people here were at that community meeting? Okay, so a few of you. And during that time, we brought up some of the issues and challenges that we were starting to see from that data. And we asked you all to help us identify what your top priorities as far as opportunities and challenges. This is a little bit of an eye test for you all. So if you could all read the top line. No, but really what came out was it really confirmed kind of some of the things that the planning committee had been talking about, and the items that got the highest. Sorry. The items that got the highest amount of discussion or highest prioritization were the impacts of the recent redevelopment of properties, the importance of the historically valuable homes within the community, and really you could tie those 2 things together almost. And then the third one down here below was the importance of the public space and the amenities that really help set the context of the overall community. So when we talked to the community back in May, those were the biggest issues that they saw that were rising out of the information that we were looking at. So after the community profile was prepared and after we had the community meeting, we created this list of challenges and opportunities that we started working with to frame our comprehensive plan, vision, and goals. And so these 5 primary topics rose to the top, which were housing stock. And when we talk about housing stock, one of the biggest challenges is addressing an aging population, which your population is the median age is about 10 years greater than your surrounding neighbors, the surrounding states, and the country as a whole. So addressing that aging population and providing opportunities for them to stay in their home, and then attracting a younger demographic that can move into the community and replace some of the people that are moving up in the community and quite honestly right now moving out. Redevelopment, which you guys have done a ton of work on through the design guidelines. And what the goal here with the plan was is really to set the policy and direction for those design guidelines to be used in the community moving forward. The other redevelopment issue was the floodplain with Brush Creek running through the community and some of the properties along there within the floodplain. How do we address those long term because they are having an impact on the overall community character? Public space protection, again, those public space and amenities that shape the context of the community. How do we protect those long term? Connectivity, specifically bike and pedestrian, how do we make a more connected community? And then finally, the visual impact of technology, recognizing that technology plays an important role on how the community grows and serves the population, but how do we mitigate the visual impact of some of that technology that's prevalent now? So again, the four pieces of the comprehensive plan are the historical context, the community profile, vision and goals, and community direction. Again, the historical context, if you look at the plan, we really start back with the original design of the community, the use of covenants and restrictions, all the way up to a couple of years ago when you revised the design guidelines. So we talked through all of that stuff pretty succinctly, but it gives you a good picture of how the community was designed and grew throughout time. The community profile, again, the existing snapshot of what your community is today with regard to demographics, housing, technology, transportation, and those public spaces. So, as I said, the bulk of the comprehensive plan really focuses on the vision and goals, the principles, and the policies. And we divided these things out into two primary chapters. And you have a handout, and instead of putting the vision and goals and principles and policies word for word on a slide, we put them on a handout so that you can follow through. And this is the actual text that is contained within the document is on your handout. And so I'm not going to read all these verbatim, but I wanted to go through and give you a sense of the direction that the community or the planning committee and the planning commission has taken with this plan. And so this is the vision statement. Mission Hill is a beautiful place to live. And then the explanation underneath it not only recognizes the community as it's been designed and has progressed to this date, but it also recognizes what needs to be protected, what needs to be focused on to maintain that quality of amenity and quality of context that everybody knows is Mission Hills. From the vision, we created 4 primary goals, again, to address the 5 primary topics that we were dealing with coming out of the issues and challenges. We had 4 primary goals, and they respond specifically to the community direction pieces that we provided in the plan in the next chapter. The first one is open space, and so you'll see the goal really is to maintain the public open space and associated cultural amenities as a classic design feature of the city. And so we had a principle that really started to set the context in which we should be doing that. And the principles are really those long-range targets that you all, when you make daily decisions, are trying to achieve. Whether it's because we can't anticipate every single development or action that a city's going to take or a property owner's going to take, we provided the goals and principles to help guide those things along. And then the piece that's not up here that's in your handout is, based on that principle, we had 7 policies that start to address the character, cultural amenities, development relationship, and protection of those public spaces. So you'll see there's action items or policy statements in there that when you all as a community, whether you're an individual property owner or a planning commissioner or a city councilman or a city staff person, you should be looking at these and saying, am I making a decision that furthers these principles and policies? So the second goal and the second piece of the community direction is streets. And recognizing, really what the streets discussion is about is recognizing that the streets provide the primary connectivity network within the community, not only for automobiles, but even currently for pedestrians and bicycles. Some places are unsafe, so how do we improve the safety? How do we improve the bicycle and pedestrian connectedness? And how do we do that in a way that the street network and the design of that network continues to complement the character of the community? And so it's not just about getting around, but it's also maintaining the design and designing streets in a way that contribute to the character. And so the goals, the principles, and the policies all start to get at those three primary topics for streets. Excuse me. The third is residential properties. And again, this has primarily to do with the redevelopment of private property and the things that have already been primarily addressed in the design guidelines. The tact we took with this was because what we would normally do is do a comprehensive plan, define a vision for development of private property, and then go into the specific design guidelines. Since we did it a little backwards, what we were trying to do is trying to anticipate the use of those design guidelines and how we could prepare vision, goals, principles and policies that would support those design guidelines as they're being used today. The other thing with the residential properties is not specifically with regard to redevelopment, but also with regard to preservation of existing homes. Because currently you have no tool to formally preserve property. And so in our discussions throughout the process, that was one of the things that came up that was very important. So Courtney will talk about in a little bit as we talk about development, redevelopment, and preservation. That's one of the things we're going to be looking at deeper is that preservation aspect. And then the 12 policies start to address a lot of different things with regard to redevelopment and preservation, both with the scale, style, accessory structures, infrastructure to serve redevelopment, and the context and the character and the impact that redevelopment has on the community. And then our final piece on the community direction is infrastructure and new technologies. And the goal is really to enable technology to enhance the quality of life in the community and serve the residents of the community, but not have a detrimental impact to the character of the community. One specific piece in this one is the use of different building materials, which again ties back to the redevelopment efforts. But how do we start to look at different building materials that are also complementary to the character of the community that we want to maintain and portray? So that is a really, really quick overview of the plan document itself. Again, you have all of the vision, the goals, the policies, and principles on the document in front of you. And then Courtney's going to take you through the issue, what we're calling the issue papers, but the topics for discussion by the Planning Commission as we continue to move forward.
I'm going to talk about, is there a slide at the end that repeats them? I'm going to talk about them as the future topics. As a layman, not a planner, think of them. So hopefully it'll be more relatable to how you guys would think about them also. So one of the topics, so what they were talking about is we've done this work to this point. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk, the Planning Commission has gone through and they did the community profile, which was actually more staff work because it was the census data. But then they worked on the comprehensive plan and what you've got there before you. Coming out of that, as Graham said, was that there were issues that needed a lot more of a concentrated effort to discuss that are important to our community. And when we look at what it is that you want Mission Hills to look like 30 years from now, 40 years from now, 50 years from now. And so they have set these aside to do in 2016 to go into in more in-depth. And then the order of these has been reviewed with the council, the Planning Commission, and then in our joint retreat of the ARB, BZA, and Planning Commission and Council. And so they're in a certain order at this point in time, but we want to hear from you if there is something that you think is more important that should be moved up on this list and that they should be in a different order. So the first one that I wanted to talk about is the redevelopment preservation issue. So from my viewpoint as the city administrator, if somebody comes into City Hall and they have purchased a piece of property, or they live in the property, and they file for a demolition permit for that piece of property, the ordinances do not allow me to say no, okay? They have to be sold their building permit. We have changed it so there's 10 days, there's a 10-day waiting period so that we can notify the neighbors. That is not enough time for neighbors to get usually anything done legally. So it's not really to keep them from demolishing the house, it's just to let you know it's going to happen, okay? So it's just an information piece. But I'm concerned because there are houses, specific ones that were designed by J.C. Nichols for a particular purpose, in that they contribute to the community and the view shed of certain parts of town. And so I've gone to the Western manuscripts that J.C. Nichols Company gave to UMKC and the University of Missouri and Columbia. And I have pulled a whole lot of the boxes and gotten a whole lot of the history out of that and read his notes when he developed our community. So for example, Colonial Court at 59th and Oakwood to Overhill. He specifically named it Colonial Court. He designed it with colonials lining it, and he built the two matching colonials, designed those at Colonial Court, the two wood ones, on purpose. That was a part of the vision of the whole thing. Now, we all know that one of those has had a fire. Between the fights between the three insurance companies that were involved, the house was not repaired in a timely manner because the insurance companies couldn't get together. And so it has been destroyed now due to weather, and they have purchased their demolition permit. The 10 days is up, and that building will be coming down here very soon. So that's kind of a different circumstance than someone buying it and say buying the one across the way and deciding that they don't like a colonial, but they wanted to live on that corner lot, and so they tear down the house, and then they come in and they want to build a Tudor, okay? And that would be allowed, okay? And that may be fine with everybody. And I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying as an administrator, that makes me uncomfortable that we might tear down a house without more of a review by the ARB and by the ARB first to know whether that is something that they would even allow. They may tear down a colonial in that fact and then not be allowed to build what they want. And then that colonial's gone, and you've got a vacant lot that they're trying to sell to somebody else to develop a house. And so the question in my mind, and that I have talked with the Planning Commission about, and that they're concerned about, and the council is maybe what we need to look at is certain areas of the city or a certain age of housing stock. And I'm not trying to say what it should be, but I'm just trying to share with you what the concern is. Maybe there should be a longer review process. Maybe it's that you can't demolish a house that is older than the city. So if it was built before the city became a city in 1949, I mean, some communities have done that those houses can't be demolished without a review first by the Planning Commission or by the ARB, so that there's more of a review process. It's not saying that people can't do what they want with their property. It's saying that we slow down the process, that we don't get the cart before the horse in doing that. Another example, the Goheens are here, is Verona Columns and the two Italianate Revival homes behind it. Those were specifically designed to showcase Verona Columns, which were there first. I mean, I can show you photos of where it was there first, and then they designed those houses and how those were developed. What if somebody bought one of those and decided to tear it down and wanted to put a colonial behind Verona Court? Would it really still be the Verona Columns that you all have come to love and honor? So those are the kinds of things as far as like preservation that, from my viewpoint, we are looking at. We're not trying to create necessarily historic districts. We're not trying to necessarily stop something. Now, it could be that the will of the people is to do that, is to create certain ones that are historic districts. Some communities have historic overlays, so they're not districts. You're not declaring them as historic preservation. You're not licensing them or certifying them with the state or with the feds, but that they have certain review processes that are extra for certain parts of the city. That's what some other communities that we compare ourselves to have done throughout the United States. So What we're talking about is spending some time with the Planning Commission talking about what are our options before the redevelopment speeding train that we're on right now goes to the point where we lose that identity for those structures that are a part of our important, and I say our, I know I don't live here. I've worked here for 16 years this year, and so I have started to feel pretty, like I have a real stake in what happens in this community. But I think that there are things that we need to talk about, and the council and the boards have agreed with that, and hopefully you as the public would agree with that too. And I don't know how that'll turn out, but it seems like an important conversation to have. So right now, that's kind of looking at that as the number one priority. Number two on their list right now is sustainability technology, and that comes in a variety of ways. Things have really changed. When I came 16 years ago, we do have in the zoning ordinance, we have regulations related to solar panels, okay? But solar panels today compared to solar panels in 2000 are night and day. How they're put in, how they work, how efficient they are, whether they reflect and shine into other people's houses, it's a totally different animal. And then we have geothermal wells that are being dug all over town with the new houses, and they make sense. They're a big expense to do, but they really long-term, really affect your efficiency of your house. But you know that Mission Hills is built on a lot of rock, a lot of springs, and you've got people drilling, 20, 30 feet underneath, and you know that there's a good chance that they may be disrupting the natural flow of an underground spring, for example. And so you may live next door to one of these, and you may never have had a wet basement, and all of a sudden you've got a wet basement because we have absolutely no zoning regulations related to geothermal. Anybody can do it anytime they want, anywhere in their yard. So that's an example of something that I, as an administrator, would prefer that we talk about before you call me with your wet basement, and I have to say we don't regulate underground water. And so I don't know why that happened, but in my mind I might be thinking, well, it's probably that permit for that geothermal I sold last week. But it is something that happens. Solar panels, like I said, we've had some younger people that are moving into our community, which is really exciting. They want very energy efficient homes. They want to add solar panels on their roofs. And we are not really prepared. One of those came to the ARB. We had so many requirements because we didn't understand how it was going to work that finally the young man just gave up. And so we need to kind of deal with some of that stuff ahead of time so that we are more informed about those things so that we can decide what is acceptable and what's not acceptable and what are the circumstances when those come into effect. Another thing I think we have to talk about when we talk about technology is what you're seeing right now with AT&T laying the fiber, the one big fiber. Google, I will tell you unofficially, they met with myself late last week to name the 7 fiber hoods that will be released coming up here soon in the next couple of months for you guys to sign up for Google Fiber. So they'll be coming in here soon too. So that will be AT&T tearing up the front of your house and then Google coming in and tearing up the front of your house. We need to start talking about all of the little pedestals that are going to start appearing in front of our houses, or the ones that are buried like AT&T, but still you have a manhole type cover in your yard. We also are getting calls constantly lately from new technology, which is wireless repeaters that they want to put on all of our street lights. Do we want that? Do we want street lights that are 3 times as wide in the base to be able to hold the technology that's required? Because we just took down those really big power poles on Melinda because they were so unsightly. Now people want to come in and put up those exact same size poles for wireless repeaters. Do we want that? Or you also have the ones that actually hook onto the outside of the light and have solar panels, And seriously, these people don't understand why when they call, we're like, we're really not interested. And they don't understand it at all. They're like, but everybody wants this. And I'm like, well, we have a tower at 63rd and Mission Road, and we have a tower at 64th and State Line. So right now we're pretty well covered. And then we have a tower at Shawnee Mission Parkway. So we really have 3 different areas where we're getting coverage at the moment, but, you know, they want to come in. At some point, they will get permission from the Kansas legislature to come in regardless of whether we want them or not. That's just a fact. We no longer run telecommunications in our community. The legislature has taken that away from us. All of it is based upon state statute now, and all they do is pay us their 5%, but we don't have really any say over them anymore. So pretty soon, these wireless repeaters are going to be the same way. They're going to say the cities won't let us come in, the legislature will take over and tell us they have to come in. So we need to have ahead of time what our regulations are going to be as far as the aesthetics, because that's the one thing that federal government and the state cannot take away from us, is our ability to rule on the aesthetics. So we need to get ahead of it, in my opinion. The next thing on sustainability and technology is the same thing that I mentioned about the younger people particularly coming in, or people who are planning on aging in place. You want energy efficient. So when we're looking at garage doors, when I came 16 years ago, a garage door had to be wood. That's all there was to it. Now people are coming in with fiberglass, they're coming in with the new cement panels, you know, all of these different kinds, because they're much more energy efficient. It's like windows. Windows don't necessarily have wood trim anymore, you know, is that okay? It's the shingles that are on houses. There's concrete shingles, there's the fake slate, the fake shake, all of those things that look different. And you even have it in your neighbors in fencing material, you know, that people that want the not real wood because they don't want to have to maintain it. So again, maybe that's something that we should be talking about before it comes to the A or B, so that we know as a community where we want to go under those kinds of circumstances and what is allowed or what should be a concern. And those things change every day too. So that's the reason why it's good to have it in the comprehensive plan and in the planning commission, so that it's more of a guideline or an issue, because things are changing so quickly. I mean, the fake slate that we have on City Hall is totally different than what they're making today and the companies that are out there. And when we got ours, it was like one company, and now there's like scads of companies who make them. And so we have to be able to have general principles that we can use to address these things rather than specific principles as far as that goes. Next is floodplain redevelopment. This is one of my little pet peeves, so I'll just admit it. And what that is that the federal government has told the states that they have to manage the floodplain. The Kansas, state of Kansas has then turned it over to the cities. I am your floodplain administrator by law. I go to trainings all the time. In fact, I'm going to one later on in March, which is what happens if our city violates and what kind of a fine do we get. So that's my next training. I have accidentally violated, and luckily there were 3 cities, and they said maybe we didn't train you well enough, so we did not get a fine. But what is happening is when we adopted our new floodplain, August 3rd of 2009, and understand that floodplain ordinance is written by the feds, given to the state, given to the cities. They're really, you don't get to change it. You don't get to say, oh, well, we don't like this clause, so we're going to take it out. If we don't adopt the floodplain ordinance as it is given to us, then everyone in the city who has the National Flood Insurance Program flood insurance cannot purchase it anymore. Therefore, that's a really big stick. We tend to adopt it exactly as it is. In 2009, a new section was added in, and that section says that if your home is in the floodplain, that you cannot make improvements on your home that are more than 50% of the value of the home. So what happens is somebody buys a home in the floodplain, does not realize that. They may pay $800,000 for that property, but the actual house, the improvement on the lot, may only be worth $50,000. Then they want to come in and redo the kitchen, and I can only sell them a permit for $25,000. And then they can't remodel the house the way that they want to. And that is a cumulative, so you don't get to do $25,000 this year and $25,000 next year. I reread the floodplain ordinance this afternoon, and it actually says on the very first page, the goal is to get development out of the floodplain. So their goal is for these houses to fall down and be removed. But our question as a community is, what do we do? We've got 17 homes right now that are in the floodplain. The floodplain grows all the time because as there's more and more development in Overland Park, Prairie Village, the floodplain widens and widens and widens. Who knows how many houses it'll be the next time we do a new floodplain map. And those houses can't maintain themselves over a long period of time. So we're going to have an issue with homes that can't be maintained at the quality that you would expect in Mission Hills. And so that's a concern about how are we going to handle that situation. Mr. Cooper Smith was asking about whether we were going to incorporate into sale documents the fact that these restrictions are on there so that people will know. And then he asked about gas underneath the ground and the restrictions on that, which we don't have any information that we're working on right now on the gas. But no, right now it's buyer beware. And so if you're a real estate agent, when you buy it, it'll say it's in the floodplain. I mean, it legally is forced to say that. But if you are not a person who's going to come in and check and see what that means, I mean, we have a lot of properties that have property in the floodplain. It's a corner. It's the front, part of their driveway or whatever. And this rule does not affect that. It only affects it if the structure is in the floodplain or in the floodway. And, but right now it's buyer beware. If you don't come in and talk to me, you might not know about this rule or about what that means on that house. So, yes, Mr. Novak?
I was just curious, has that rule, because the government's essentially compromising the value of that individual's house and it's a grant, has it ever been tested in the courts?
I don't know. In fact,
curious.
The council at the joint retreat said that maybe our city attorney should look a little more into that and see what's going on. Like I said, it was really interesting. It came out last week that there's going to be a big training across the state of Kansas on violations and what that means, because some communities are simply ignoring it and selling the permits. One, I would rather not have everybody in the city lose their flood insurance because of me. But two, we already got caught because I accidentally did sell a permit that was more than 50% because I didn't know about that rule. So they are now watching us. And they actually get copies of our building permits and they look at them and then they go back and review what the appraised value is. The best thing right now that I could tell people to help them through this circumstance is that it does not say where we get the appraised value from. So the only appraised value I have access to right now is what the county does. But if you got a different appraiser to give a different price and they certified that, I would accept that. So if you can get an appraiser who appraises it at a different level, then we would be able to accept that. And I have checked that with the state of Kansas and they said that was perfectly reasonable. So, so that's really where we try to get people to go. I work a lot with people on how they can pull their house out of the floodplain. There are some ways to add fill at certain points on some houses, and then you can do a letter of map revision that pulls your actual house out. And I spend a lot of time with people doing that. The house at 66th and Mission Drive that's just done a bunch of work across from the church, that house was in the floodplain, and they were able to regrade the yard, and we were able to do a letter of map revision so that this did not apply to them. Because they bought this house expecting to basically remodel it and flip it, and then found out that they had just sunk their money into something that the house's improvement was only worth $12,000. And they would not have been able to do it. So we spend a lot of time on this issue, but I think we need to start talking about it long term. If the goal of the federal government, which is the first page, is to take all of these and make this green space, then we need to figure out how we want to do that in a logical manner instead of waiting until they fall down, I think. But that's just my opinion. Transportation connectivity, again, pedestrian connectivity, bicycle connectivity, and street character. These are issues that we talk about a lot. The mayor had his committee on sidewalks that met and trails, and the end result was that maybe we will do some connectivity on State Line, but right now that's about it. Maybe a little connectivity on 63rd Street from Hiawassee Park to Aberdeen to make a little more of a walking trail. But but it's very limited. But at the same time, we are having an increase in the number of families with children under 13. We have a community that is very fit, and as they said, we have an aging community, so people are trying to stay fit so that they can maintain in their home. The issue of sidewalks, the issue of trails, the issue of biking lanes is going to become more prevalent, not less prevalent, as we go through this, so we need to talk about where we want to go with that. Public spaces, that was real interesting. I don't know if anybody picked up on that Kansas City, Missouri sold a park lately. So that was in the news. You know, there was nothing, there are council people here, I'm not suggesting that there has ever been a discussion to sell any park in this community. But with the tax lid that the state of Kansas has put on us at the legislative level, who knows in a few years whether we can maintain our parks. And if we can't, you know, because we'll have to go to a vote of the people, and that may become an option. If that's not an option for the community, we need to talk about that. We need to have that in our comprehensive plan. The 3 golf courses that we have is a huge part of our green space, a huge part of our identity as a community. Both the Kansas City and the Mission Hills Country Club, if you read their plats, cannot be sold for any use other than as a country club. It's actually in their deed restrictions. The Indian Hills Country Club, on the other hand, there specifically says it can be subdivided into a housing development. So that's part of what the Planning Commission needs to talk about. You know, is that acceptable? Is that something that we would ever want? Is there something that the comprehensive plan should do to start to address that issue? Because, as we all know, Meadowbrook, Homestead, I mean, country clubs are closing. And they are struggling. So it could happen. And particularly when you look at 30 years or 40 years. So we need to talk about it now. So those are the things. Tree in our urban forest. Our council wants to plant 100 trees a year. Okay, we remove about 50 trees a year. So that's an increase in our urban forest of about 50 trees a year. We have over 3,000 trees. We have more trees than we have people right now in the city that are publicly owned, okay? But with the redevelopment, we have more and more builders who are coming in and clear-cutting lots because it's more convenient for them when they're building the homes because they can move their equipment around easier. We have emerald ash borer. We had 4 more trees identified today on city property with emerald ash borer. The emerald ash borer has now been found in other states, mostly on the East Coast where it has been for longer than it's been here, that they've now moved to fringe trees. So they do not just eat ash trees as everybody originally thought. They will move on to another species once they are done with all of the ash in the area. The ash is just their favorite, kind of like smoked salmon's mine. So they just, you know, are going to move on. The longhorn Asian beetle is coming. Okay, it's in Illinois. It loves maples, and it likes oaks, and it has a whole list of things that it really likes. And the only way to destroy it is to remove the trees and grind them up. There is no treatment for the longhorn Asian beetle at this moment. So we need to start thinking about our urban forests. We have a 25% refusal rate when we mark the public right-of-way where there is an appropriate place for a tree. Now, our arborists, when they look to put a tree in, they are looking at your private trees. We don't want the city's trees canopy to interrupt your canopy and hurt your tree. They look at how much open space there is for that. They look at line of sight, you know, from driveways, corners, and all of those things. But right now, our system is to ask you, we mark where we think a tree would go and ask you if you would like a tree. And if you say no, we don't plant it. But we are to the point after this year that we will have no more locations that are not due to removals where we will be able to plant trees unless the council decides that they're going to plant a tree on city property whether you like it or not. And that's a question. Do we do that or do we continue with our current policy, which is if you don't want it, we don't plant it? So, you know, that's something that we have to think about. And especially as the private trees are being taken down, too. And I guess I'm concerned if we don't start planting some of those smaller trees with the longhorn Asian and the emerald ash borer you know, what are we gonna do? I mean, in the end, we're not gonna have any big trees and our canopy's gonna be gone, and then maybe we won't be such a walkable city because it'll be harder and hotter. The last thing is the caretaker housing. We have a policy in the city of Mission Hills, because we are a single-family homes, that you cannot have a separate apartment in your house, or you can't have a detached accessory building with both a kitchen and a bathroom and a bedroom. You can have a bathroom or you can have a kitchen, but you can't have both, because they're not to be made for somebody to move into them, okay? And I will say, because I get calls on this, a single-family home does not mean that you all have to be related. A single-family home can have up to 3 unrelated people according to our zoning regulations. But as people are aging in place, they need more assistance, you know, or they want to bring their parents to live with them because their parents are aging and they don't want to have them somewhere else. And so they want to be able to build detached accessory buildings, or they want to be able to build an apartment in their home and put in an elevator for their aging parents. But right now, that's not something that is allowed within our city. And so the question is, do we continue with that policy of that's not allowed? The thing that I deal with a lot as a city administrator is that as I get to know people, is people calling me and saying how sad they are that they're having to leave our community, that they can't find a home that meets their aging needs. And so they're moving to Prairie Village mostly, to the patio homes, and we don't offer anything like that for them. So if we want people to be able to age in place in our community, the question is, what kind of things do we need to think about in our comprehensive plan that allows people to age in place in our community? So those are the topics that I was to run through, and we'll take questions, or if you want to give us comments, if you think the order should be different. So right now, the first order of business for the Planning Commission, once they adopt the comprehensive plan, is to go into the redevelopment preservation, looking at how should we handle maybe certain view sheds or certain ages of houses in a different manner to slow down the demolition process until we have more of a review. The next thing is the sustainability, the technology, what should we be doing about that? Floodplain redevelopment is the third thing, and then after that we've got the transportation, the public spaces, and the caretaker housing.
Well, I've got a question. I mean, Dick, are you saying that we just put a 10-day set aside rule in place? I mean, is that what you were saying?
We already have a 10-day set aside rule
For a demo?
for a demo.
And is that for an interior total demo?
Yes. Interior demos don't have that, of course, at all
Okay,
for
so
redevelopment.
during a 10-day set aside for the demolition,
Mhm.
what kind of procedures take place during that? I mean, what is the purpose, other than to notify surrounding neighbors?
That is the purpose.
I mean, so it really is just a...
It's to notify, really what happened was, sorry.
What would change then?
So, I don't know, I mean, that's what the planning commission would have to go through, but right now, it is to notify the neighbors. What happens is that people leave for the winter, and they come home, and the house next door is gone. And they're like, what in the world happened? Or they, go on vacation. And so it was a request a few years ago from the public that we at least give some notice to the neighbors. And so we require that 10 days so we can get letters out to them with the plan that they have at least 5 days of heads up that it's coming. The other thing that we added last year, the Planning Commission worked on it, is we also now, the immediate neighbors get 48 hours notice with a door knocker on hanger for them, so that they'll be aware of it coming down. So, and I'm just suggesting that possibly, that there should at least be some discussion on whether there may be some circumstances where we would want to lengthen that time or have some kind of a review during that time instead of it just being a notice to the neighbors.
The unfortunate thing is you can notify us, but there's not much to do.
Right now you can't do anything. It's not there for you to do anything. It's there just to give you a heads up. Okay.
I think that's the point is there something else that needs to be put in place to allow people to either contest it, support it, whatever that may be. One of the topics during our process was, if I own a home in Mission Hills and I want to protect it for the long term, there's no mechanism for me to go do that right now, other than go to a third party and put a preservation easement on it. But is there something that the city, that you all could do from the city perspective that would allow you to protect your own property for the future? That's one example.
And understand that Graham and I aren't saying that's what should happen. We're not saying that it should necessarily have any kind of a change. I was just trying to explain some of the issues that raised it to the point where that the planning commission is actually going to discuss it in more depth.
And that's the point of the issue papers, is to bring back information so that they can continue this discussion about options and things. Go ahead.
I've dealt with Courtney for years, she knows, and she works really hard. I think we're tying her hands. I think we have the right to slow this down for better notification, not just longer, but better, like email. Because a lot of people, if they are gone, the letter might be there for 20 days, and they still don't know. I think we have to recognize technology as a notification system and utilize that. You can't stop it, I get that, but I could think of an instance, someone's planning a wedding party in your backyard, and you can't change that in 10 days or 5 days. I mean, it can impact you in a major way, and we do deserve to know so we can change our plans. We can't change the demo, but that's just being friendly. We need to be friendlier. We need to think more as neighbors and not like, you can't do anything about this, and boo-boo.
So you made the statement that you can't stop it. If you could stop it, would that be something that would be supported?
Well, that's where you go to the ARB meetings. I mean, that's where you can hear your voice there, but again, you need notification on that.
Right.
And I believe the parameter of notification should be expanded because of the impact of the number of construction cars. You might be within the 5 houses or whatever, but you might be 6 houses away and you can never park in front of your house, so don't get me started on that. But, I mean, there's a lot of good here, it's just that we need to not tie Courtney's hands and the city's hands. We need to help her not have to field these questions that we can change. It's easy.
Sir?
The comments on J.C. Nichols, very intriguing. Is there any review committee now that takes into account the historical perspective?
No, that's not really. I mean, they have to, the ARB has to make certain findings, and one is that it's in keeping with the comprehensive plan. That's why this review process of the comprehensive plan and this rewrite is so important, and that's why these white papers are important, is because if through the white papers thing, the Planning Commission decides to change the comprehensive plan, then that will be something that they are going to have to think about, because they will have to make that finding that it's in keeping with the comprehensive plan. But right now, no, they're not required to look at the historical history behind that house or whatever. And I will, Bill Bruning brought up the thing about it's not just the older part of the community, and that's true. I mean, and it's not just J.C. Nichols. I mean, we've had multiple developers. I'm just saying that's an example of where there was, documentation of thoughtful development that my signature on the demolition, I do not feel is thoughtful demolition. There was thoughtful development, maybe there should be more thoughtful demolition. That would be something that, so the question was whether there's been any consideration of making any part of Mission Hills a historical district. And that is something that briefly the Planning Commission has discussed and that they will be talking about. So,
I think that will be a topic in our white paper.
Braden?
Sure. I'm Braden Graham, one of the city council members, and also liaison to the ARB. One of the things that we try to do is be as transparent as possible. And so I would encourage you, if you have any questions, to honestly let us know. Also, there's a new app that you can get on your phone for, I think it's Mission Hills Official. And you go to the search button. That has all the information on the calendars. Also, all the ARB agendas are loaded up a week at least, or weeks.
A week before. So tomorrow, you'll see the agenda for next Tuesday.
So you'll see every single property that's up for the ARB. We are looking at every different avenue of this, and feel free to honestly let us know about any issues you might have. But also know that if you start looking into the historical preservation of properties, there are a lot of things you might not know that you have to do regarding those. So I just want to mention the app as well as the transparency on the website, which is missionhillskansas.gov.
Yes.
And it's missionhillsks.gov, I believe. It will have everything, and so I know notification is an issue. We try to notify everyone and try to be as transparent as possible with everything that's going on. But please feel free to continue the conversation because this is excellent input from Hope.
Ms. Coughlin?
Yes. We have had historic preservation status on our home for about 18 years. And I'm part of the National Group, Historic Preservation Group. And you are limited to what you can do on the outside of the house to the extent that we have an English Tudor limestone house built in 1928. If we wanted to put a carport with an aluminum roof on it out back, they wouldn't let us do it. So when I looked at the things that were limitations, I mean, inside I could make it into a modern art museum and nobody would care. The outside, the footprint is their concern.
But you can't add a thing.
You can, you just have.
But it has to be within the confines of the existing.
Well, no, you have to get permission from them. Or you can just resign your historic preservation status.
Right.
Honestly, out of it.
But as a one house within a group?
We're just one house.
Yeah. You can have individual houses, and honestly, there is a discussion about whether, we should help people to designate individually their homes, whether we should look at maybe not even designating through the state, but rather having a historical overlay district or something like that, or different districts for different historical time periods, because different parts of the city. I mean, it's all open to discussion, but do know that the old Peak House was added onto extensively, which is a historic designation, and ARB had to work with the state and the owners, but they were able to add everything they wanted on it. It just had to look a certain way. So
real quickly before we go
Yeah.
get deeper into this, so on our team is Susan Richards Johnson and Amanda Moore, who are historic preservationists and architects, and so they're going to help us. In fact, they're going to do most of it, but they're going to bring back ideas that you all and the Planning Commission can continue to discuss. What we've always said to the city is historic preservation may not be right, preservation easements may not be right, there may not be a right tool out there that you can just pull off the shelf. There may be something unique to you all that would work better. So we're going to bring back that information and continue to have that conversation.
Courtney, I gave Courtney a big booklet today. I'm from Dallas, and Highland Park, J.C. Nichols was on the board to develop Highland Park. There's a lot of similarities and overlay, so I always go to their website and say, how do they do it? But they actually do have what you just said. They have a unique committee. I mean, I think they shame them into it or out of it, and they have awards, and it feels very official, but they're not national. They can't just, you're going to need another packet. You're going to have to sign. You understand that you may have some special limitations. But they created this, I don't know what the exact name looks like, it's Park City's Historic and Preservation Society, but we used to have the beautification committee. I don't know if that's still.
Yeah, that's the park.
Yeah, maybe that gets expanded into that.
Well, and I will say, anybody who's really interested in this topic, because we want to go on to, is if you would like to give us your email address or your name, we will contact you. We can put together a list so that when the Planning Commission is talking about some topic that you're very interested in, we can make sure that we let you know, that we send you, particularly if you send us an email or you give us your email address, we can say, okay, Ms. Allen is concerned with redevelopment. So when we're talking about that white paper, we would send you a notice to tell you that the Planning Commission on such and such a date is going to talk about that white paper. So, we can work with you. We only have 8 staff, so we really do need like an email address or something that's easy for us to do a group invite to, but we would be happy to invite people and keep you informed if you need to. Since that brought up, I know that this is a little off topic, but this is very important. Anybody who is walking or biking, please, please pay attention to the road closed. We had a walker today at Wananga and 63rd Street. Indian Lane wanted to go down the closed part of Indian Lane where we're working, and they went around the construction fence and a backhoe almost took off the person's head. And that person had walked into a construction zone. That construction worker was not responsible. That walker was responsible for walking around and getting inside of a construction zone, and that construction worker had no idea that the woman was there. So please pay attention. You are not to be in a construction zone, and you are, you have taken on that risk when you walk into it or when you bike into it. So please pay attention to those construction zones. It's very dangerous. And if you do get the app that Councilman Perry was talking about, the app is going to be showing you updates of when intersections are closed and open, because there will be different times that the intersections along 63rd Street will be open and closed, and so you will be able to see that. We can't actually give you access to walk along the Kansas City Country Club because they actually own the property to the middle of Indian Lane. That is private property. That is not city-owned property. We do not have a right-of-way on the west side of Indian Lane. I just want you to know. That is their private property. And so we couldn't officially give you permission. But Indian Lane, there is going to be some times when you'll be able to get on it and it'll be quieter. But right now with AT&T, they're putting in 18,000 pairs of copper wire for you guys to have phone service when we take out the bridge, and so it's a lot going on in there right now. So it's pretty dangerous. Mr. Glosser?
Less than 3 minutes, Chris. My name is Bob Klosser. I'm a 35-year resident. I have an ongoing interest due to my involvement since the early 80s, when Galloway wrote this plan that you reviewed. I was on the planning commission then, and we were involved. Your profile, Gould Evans, I think is well done. It's very comprehensive. Some highlights from your review, all from your review, that I've read very carefully. From the 1980s planning, redevelopment was to not detract from the character of this community. In the last 5 years, we've had 35 teardowns and 94 additions. Some residents, all in your review, have felt that this perhaps was not, has resulted in a change of character. Reference ordinances. To implement your plan objectives, ordinances are to protect the integrity of the neighborhood. Your goal 3, page 30. Redevelopment to be approved in accordance with the city ordinances, which are in our case, the zoning regulations. Balance. That's the key, and you struck it. Balance. In my opinion, and your opinion, is between the development rights of private property owners and preserving the community character. My wife and I have discussed this in the last 2 days, and we strongly believe that the only
assurance of this balance is to update our zoning regulations as needed. In conclusion, over the last 2 decades, side yard open space as viewed from the street, commonly known as streetscape, has diminished significantly, and comparative aerial views from before and now would show this. Nothing in your reviews, I don't think, mention side yard setbacks or open space as they pertain to viewing from the street. The open space of our golf courses and our parks are obvious. To preserve our open space character, side yard setbacks are much more important than the front building line, which is adequately covered now, have to be in line with everybody in the street, or the backyards, which is adequately covered now. Well, except as it may affect the neighbor. Or even height. If you wanted more space, build up. With record demos and remods, further diminishment will occur decade by decade, as you mentioned in your report, 50 years to 100 years. Unless the regulation governing side yard building line for mid-sized lots is changed. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming tonight. I think we got a lot of really good information. There were several members of the Planning Commission here and from the Gould Evans team that heard your information. Please, stay informed. Please contact us. Jill Clifton is our planner. She's in the back of the room. If you have any questions about what's going on, she is the staff to the Planning Commission and also the ARB. Megan Woolbright is next to her, and Megan is the assistant to the city administrator, and she is the secretary to the Planning Commission. So if you have any questions or need information, both of them are really good contacts. And then I think I knew most of the people in the room, and so you all know me, and you can always call me. So anyway, thank you so much. This was great. Thank you for coming.